My dog Stella has cornered a big coon, I think. She keeps barking. Still. Still. Leave him alone. Still. Leave him alone. Let's see if we can get him. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Heard him growling in there. Still. There he is. Get back, get back, get back, get back, get back. Still, get back, get back, get back. Still. Still. Get back. That's a big one. That's a really big coon. Alrighty there. Welcome back to the show. This is the two-stroke turbo channel. If you're not familiar with it, well, you should subscribe. This is a great automotive resource. What are we looking at today? We're looking at my shop dog Stella laying in the shade here beneath my Scirocco. She's hot. And also this Corrado yellow Scirocco that I've had since I was 15 years old is pretty hot. I'm now quite a bit older. It's been 40 years, I think. I'm not going to date myself, but yeah, it's been 40 years. And we're going to do a video on this car soon. We're going to get it running. It's been sitting for a while. I did wash it, got the rats out of it, letting it air out, letting it dry out here in the sunshine. It is 75 degrees today in Portland, Oregon. It's really nice and warm. It's perfect. And we've got micro cars lined up. We've got our big show coming up next month, our Great Pacific Northwest Microcar Show. So if you're interested, go to www.gpnwmme.com and register. It's free, it's fun. We've got lots of cool cars. So, talking about car content, what are we working on today? Lots of neat things in the shop today. Not any what I would call bread and butter cars. These are all fun cars to work on. We've got this Isetta all torn apart. We are putting new shocks in the Isetta. Let me turn the light on here so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. So the Isetta has a really fun, compact, and pretty well engineered front suspension. It's very compact. It has this double knuckle trailing arm, pitman arm system with oil in here. That is the suspension, really, I guess, with a spring that's inside here around a shock absorber. I guess I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it, but to get everything outboard of the interior, you need to have a very compact, durable suspension. So we've got 10-inch tires, probably 8-inch drum brakes. These brakes are leaking. You can see the wheel cylinder there is a double action, pushes on both sides, and it expands the shoes into those little dinky drums down there. And my job today is to get the brakes working good and fix the shocks. The shocks are original. The shocks are incorporated inside this shock tower, and I've made a special compression tool, which is this guy. It looks like a big A-frame made out of rebar and some metal, and you have to compress, keep this tight to let the pressure off the spring so you can get the shock out of here. So that's what we're doing today. We have two new shocks ready to go on this Isetta to make it ride super nice. They're very unique. The spring rides down on this perch right here, and it is incorporated inside that shock tower. So we're going to get that out of there. I'm going to show you how to do that. I've got to unloosen this bottom shock bolt right here, touching, and the whole thing should come apart. I've already compressed the spring, and the shock tower is held on by these through bolts that go through the side here. So let's get to work, get this apart, get this thing running, stopping, and driving. This is going to be a fun project. Stay with me, will you? All right, so I'm going to demonstrate a little bit what's going on here, how you compress a shock on a BMW Isetta. This is the driver's side. Wheel cylinder is not leaking. This looks much better on this side. This is how the shock lives, shock and spring. There's a bolt here, cross bolt, and one here that holds this whole tower on. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our homemade spring compressor and you just kind of loop it in there. So you kind of get the bottom underneath and you get the top on top there. It might take 2 hands or 2 tries, and you might have to turn it around the right way. Right orientation. There we go. We're getting close. It's really hard to do with one hand. So you get the top like that, hooked around. There you go. And you pull the sides around without pulling the car off the lift because it's very lightweight. And you get it all just right. And then the idea is you basically turn these nuts, which clamps the whole thing to allow you to take out these bolts without the thing springing apart. And then you can remove the shock tower and spring assembly. Usually these nuts on the top, the double nuts right up top here, are rusted together, and you have to cut them off in the vise, and then you can replace the whole shock assembly. I hope I'm doing a good job of explaining that. It's just a compression tool that you're trying to hold everything together while you loosen it up so it doesn't just spring apart. And it's custom for an Isetta. Pretty cool, I think. This is a good example. So I need 2 hands. I'm going to put this on there, start clamping it, and take it apart. All right, so once you have your shock compression tool in place, you can take your gear wrench, slip it over your all thread, and you can start to tighten just like this. Or if you can do it by hand, that's even better. I should say by fingers. And you just want to put a little compression on this shock tower to keep it from springing up and hitting the body and something flying into your face. You always want to avoid something in your face. Now, on the other side, I should say, the shock is being a bit stubborn. The shock sheath, or this metal insert for the bushing, is seized to the bolt, which the bolt is attached to the hub. So I'm having a bit of trouble getting this one off. I got penetrating oil, letting it soak. I'm trying to wiggle it. I may have to put a puller or something like a tie rod puller on here to get that to pop off. So be aware that this may be rusted onto the bolt and causing you some trouble. This one's probably going to be the same, but I got to take this nut off and we'll get to work. Okay, so a lot of wiggling and bouncing around. I got this one out. And the problem with the other side is this bushing is really seized. You can tell those bushings are really old. Pretty nasty. So I'm going to keep loading it up full of penetrating oil and see if I can get, I don't know, some type of a puller in there to get that one out. But that one is really stuck. You can see the rust on it. But at least we got one out. So now we're going to get the top off. I think I'm going to have to use a saw to cut the top of the shock off. I just don't see any other way. And then take out the shock, put the spring on it, put it back together. So while we're still struggling and letting the penetrating oil seep and ooze into that seized bushing on that side, I'm going to show you how, or demonstrate how, the Isetta front suspension is really ingenious. You see these 2 trailing arms here? And the shock would normally be connected to this big stud and then connected to the top. Watch the independent suspension, how it works. So I'm just going to push up with my hand on the bottom of the backing plate here. And look, you can get it to go way up there. So that's how much travel that has. Really ingenious to think about it. If you put all that stuff into this tiny little package back in 1950, I mean, it's dampened by the oil, and the oil greases these, what are called kingpins, I believe. No, the kingpins are the ones that are straight up and down. These would be just the swing arm pins. All pretty cool. I mean, look at how much articulation you get there. All the way, that's at least a foot. Pretty neat. It's a good example of how that works, and I'm impressed with the ingenuity from that day and age. This is all aluminum, this whole knuckle, so it's lightweight. This whole car weighs 700 pounds. I have to be very careful when I'm using my brute strength pushing and pulling and trying to get that shock off that I don't pull the whole car off the rack. It's actually moved a couple times. It's kind of scary. I don't want my little egg to crack. All right, so as you can see, our shock is still stuck in our Isetta. We have resorted to extreme measures. We have a puller in here. I took a tie rod or end link puller and got it to hook on there. I did try to burn the bushing out with a torch, but it just smoked like crazy and just made a toxic environment. I'm gonna try this puller. I don't know if it's gonna work because I can't get square on it, but my options are limited. Okay, so I'm still fighting getting the shock off. I used my tool and I got the shock halfway off, but the inner sleeve is still seized onto the hub. So I've started to undo the trailing arms and I'm just gonna pull the whole thing off. I've got to disconnect the brake line to get access to cutting that sleeve off the center there. So that's a bummer, but what are you gonna do? Okay, so we now have a hub in the bucket. Didn't think it was gonna come to this. The shock is halfway off, but this sleeve is completely seized on the shaft. So I've got to get the shock off, and then I've got to figure out how to slice that sleeve off without doing any damage to the control arm. Oh! Some things just turned into a lot of work. This was supposed to be like a 30-minute deal. Needless to say, this has been a stubborn project. We finally got the shock off by using this tie rod puller tool. I was able to pull it off of this shaft, but now this metal sleeve is stuck, rusted. I'm going to try to heat it up, and now that I've got access to it, I can heat it up effectively, put a vice grip on it. Hopefully I don't have to slice it. I may end up slicing it down the side, but I can work on it. I've got the whole entire hub assembly off, and more good news, there's a rotten bushing here that I didn't see before. That's always wonderful. Just focus on one thing. Okay.